So, Chapter 1, A New Teacher. "Poor Miss Dee Dee," said Melody. "I feel sorry for her." A couple of other girls in the 3rd grade classroom at Bailey Elementary School agreed. She got what she deserved. Eddie, the class bully, was a tall kid with curly red hair. Melody turned to Eddie. "You shouldn't have been so mean to her. If you had been nicer, she wouldn't have gotten crazy." "It's not my fault," Eddie said. "Nobody else is very nice to her either." It was true. There was not one innocent person in the whole class. Every student there had talked out loud, or thrown paper wads, or done something to drive the teacher crazy. Miss Dee Dee had not actually gone nuts, but she had quit her job. After she found her desktop drawer full of shaving cream. She had been looking for a pencil when she stuck her hands into the mint-scented shaving cream. "I can't stand it anymore," Miss Dee Dee screamed. She held her hands up like a surgeon and looked around the room. A wild look came into her eyes. "I don't know who this is, but I want you to know that you will pay for it someday. You'll get yours. Someday, somewhere, you'll pay." She laughed and crackled, kind of loud, and left the room. So that is like the end of that paragraph, but that is the thing. She kind of has like a triple, double, whatever chin. I don't know. Okay. So this will be my background in like all of my reading videos. My background. Okay, so let's get started. No one in the 3rd grade had seen Miss Dee Dee but it was rumored that she had moved to a small town in the farthest corner of Alaska. Today, the 3rd grade of Bailey Elementary was getting their new teacher. No one had ever seen her yet, and everyone was worried. "What if we get a male wrestler?" Melody twisted one of her jet black pigtails. "My cousin's teacher moved away, and she got a male wrestler for their new teacher." "Oh, be serious," Melody, Howie laughed and wrinkled his freckled-covered nose. "Wrestlers don't become teachers." "I'm serious. He weighed at least 300 pounds and had muscles the size of watermelons. He threatened to stuff anybody who misbehaved inside their pencil box." "Did he ever do it?" Howie asked. "No, he never had to. Nobody ever misbehaved," Melody answered. Everybody agreed that having a male wrestler for a teacher would be a lot worse than having Miss Dee Dee. A short girl named Lisa spoke up. "Maybe we'll get Miss I don't know how to pronounce this. Viola Swamp." Everyone laughed. Viola Swamp was a character in this book that we were reading. Lisa turned bright red. "Well, we might get her for our teacher, and then you'd all be sorry." That silenced everyone. Viola Swamp was the strictest, meanest teacher in the whole world. If they got somebody like her, they would all be doomed. "Don't worry," Eddie bragged. "I can take care of any teacher, even a male wrestler." Footsteps from outside the hall made everyone scramble into their seats, and uneasy quiet settled over the class. As the footsteps stopped in front of the 3rd grade room, a couple of students took deep breaths as the doorknob slowly turned. Chapter 2, Miss Jeepers. There's also an illustration, so I'll show you that later. Their principal, Mr. Davis, walked into the classroom with a beautiful lady. "Good morning, students," the principal said. Mr. Davis looked something like an egg with 2 legs. He wore dark-rimmed glasses and was completely bald. "I would like to introduce your new teacher, Miss Jeepers." Mrs. Jeepers smiled to the class and said, in a strange accent, "It's very nice to meet you, boys and girls. I am sure we are going to have a good year together." I am not going to do that the whole time that she speaks. Now that you get kind of like, I guess, what she sounds like. So just like picture that in your head. Some of the girls in the back of the room giggled at her accent. And Mr. Davis looked at them sternly. "I am sure that no one in the class would give you trouble, Miss Jeepers. If they do, I want you to let me know." And there you go. There is Mr. Davis with their new teacher. Those are the girls in the back giggling, and she looks kind of creepy. That does not look like that. Okay, let's go to the next page. "Thank you, Mr. Davis. I am sure we will be fine." Miss Jeepers smiled, an odd little half smile. The door closed with a loud clink as Mr. Davis left. All 22 children looked at Miss Jeepers. She was a kind of short, and her legs red hair and pulled back in a purple barrette. She wore a starched white blouse with a high collar. The collar was a green birch the size of a chicken egg. It seemed to glow whenever she moved. Her skirt was black and hung at the top of her black-laced pointed-toed boots. While the class stared at her, Miss Jeepers looked around the room. A couple of kids were chewing gum, and almost everybody slouched in their chairs. A fat boy picked his nose, and a girl in the back combed her long blonde hair. Loose papers and books were scattered all over the floor. Miss Jeepers cleared her throat and spoke. "I am glad to be your teacher, and I think we will start off by laying the groundwork. There are some rules I expect you to follow." Few kids in the class groaned. "Do not worry, they are not difficult rules. They're probably ones that you already been following. We will start with the most important ones." With that, Mrs. Jeepers proceeded to write 3 rules on the board. Number 1, act nicely to teachers and fellow students. Number 2, talk at appropriate times. Number 3, walk. Eddie waved his hand in the air. "What if we don't follow those rules? What will happen then?" Mrs. Jeepers smiled and flashed her green eyes. "I hope you never have to find out." With the rules of the way Miss Jeepers started classwork, everybody remembered Mr. Davis' warning for a little while in the morning. Went smoothly. Miss Jeepers seemed to be a pretty fun teacher. During social studies, she even told the class about her home country. Mrs. Jeepers speaking very softly, "I come from a country of Romania." She picked up a globe and spun it to show where Romania was located. "Jeepers, doesn't sound like Romanian name to me," Eddie said. Miss Jeepers flashed her eyes in the direction. "My real name is too difficult to pronounce. I changed it when I came to America." All the students leaned forward to hear her better. Even Eddie, who always tried to act as if she wasn't paying attention, leaned his elbows and listened. Romania is a small country bordered by Russia and the Black Sea. I grew up on my family's estate at the foot of the Transylvania Alps. It was a wonderful life until what? Lisa blurred. Miss Jeepers flashed her green eyes. Until my family was forced to leave. Why did you have to leave? Melody asked. Mrs. Jeepers gently touched her brooch. Oh, that's not important now, she said with a little half smile. Then she dismissed the class for recess. The Haunted House, number 3. There's also an illustration right there. I'll show you that later, as soon as you get what they're doing. A group of 3rd graders met under the giant oak tree at the playground. The tree's branches were like a tent above them. A breeze whispered through the golden leaves. I think she's strange, Melody said. Have you noticed her odd little smile? I think she smiles because she's nice. And her accent is really neat, Lisa said. I think her accent is pretty freaky. And what about the Romania story? Howie said. Carolee nodded her head. Why do you think her family had to leave? Do you think they were criminals? Melody's eyes got big. Maybe they're jewel thieves. That's probably where she got that brooch she wears. Have you noticed how she keeps rubbing it? So I'm pretty sure that's Howie, that's Melody, that's someone else, not someone else. No, that should be Lisa. That should be Lisa, and it didn't really say anybody else in this story. Eddie reached over and pulled Melody's ponytail. Yeah, she could even be a murderer, he snickered. I bet she murdered all the kids in her last class. Howie gave Eddie a push. Be serious. We need to decide how we are going to treat Miss Jeepers. Eddie rolled his eyes. I think you guys need to get serious. Miss Jeepers is just an ordinary teacher with a strange-sounding voice. As a matter of fact, I think she's an old-fashioned softie. What do you mean? Melody asked. What makes you think she's a softie? Eddie leaned against the rough trunk of a giant oak and looked each one of his friends in the eyes. Didn't you notice that she never once raised her voice today? And what about those sissy rules on the board? No mean teacher would think about using those rules like that. She didn't mention one thing about pushing, hitting, or spitting. But she did mention that be nice to fellow students and teachers. I'm just kidding. Or spitting. Any teacher who knows what she's doing would have really laid down the law. But all she did was smile that silly grin. So what are you going to get at? Melody asked. It's simple, Eddie said. We can get rid of this one, like we got rid of Miss Dee Dee. His friends looked at Eddie slowly. Howie started to shake his head. I don't know, Eddie. This time, you may be wrong. Miss Jeepers might surprise us. Later, on their way home, Eddie, Melody,